Morning. So, I'm doing something a little bit different today. It's not completely different, but this is going to be my top comic book series. And part of the reason is I had done like my top movies way back in the day when we first got started. One of my regrets is that I didn't really give any explanation. I wasn't going to talk about 100 movies, and so I was just like, I'll just make a list. But I'm kind of like, I should try to go back and like do an explainer or something, just a quick one-line summary. But then I have to like splice it back all together, and I don't know if I feel like doing that. So we'll see. But one of the things with like making lists, I like making lists. But Sir Chunk and I were talking about, we've been saying like, oh, we'll do 100 movies or, it's hard to do like top 10, but so we're thinking of doing 100 books. And I started doing that and I've been building my list and I was like 194. And then I was going through it with Sir Chunk and like there were some comic books on there and he said, those are separate things, even though they're not, but I mean, I was looking for any excuse I could to cut 194 down. So, what I ended up doing was taking all the comic book series that are not like graphic novels, like a V for Vendetta, and I know those were in comic form or Watchmen, and taking just like long running series or even short running series that were more series and kind of putting those separately. So this doesn't include every series. I only did the top 10. There's a few that got left out. And I'll go through those, and then my goal, and eventually we're going to get to the book thing. But so the ones that I cut, and I may be forgetting some, but I definitely know that I had to cut Postal, which was a really great, well, that short run. It was about like 2 years, I think. And that was a series by Image, and I really enjoyed that one. And I feel like there was another more recent series, and then I was debating, and then I was like, oh, it's kind of recent, and I don't know how it's going to end up. And so, and if I think of it, I'll definitely mention it. But I know for sure Postal was on there because I was really torn on my 10th pick. So, yeah, so without further ado, I guess we'll go through the 10. So my number 10, and like I said, I was torn on this, is Rat Queens, because the first, I think, 2 arcs were just absolutely amazing. And I absolutely loved it. This was like feminist, snarky D&D, just awesome. And then there was a lot of like, I guess like behind the scenes drama with like the artist and the writer and like they didn't get along, and then one of the artists quit, and then somebody else came in, but he was like a jerk or something, and I don't know. Like I try not to like get too involved in that kind of stuff because I think at some point, I mean, yeah, I don't necessarily want to give money to like people who have a pattern of abuse or something, but somebody who's done something in their lives that's kind of jerky is like, it gets hard to sort of filter all that out, because it's like eventually you're just like, all right, well, everybody, I'm sure, if you really like got into anyone's life, so people have done things that you would probably not agree with, morally or so on. So, I mean, obviously, again, if somebody, it's like hard now to like read Harry Potter, just because J.K. Rowling just, every time she does something, she just seems to like dig further in with her opinions that aren't necessarily great. And and you have like people who just like, again, like now when I watch movies, I love like so many movies that have Kevin Spacey in them, but there's like this whole like pattern there, and it's like I don't really want to look at him, but again, so I try not to get too far into this kind of stuff, like, because I mean if you get onto Twitter, like everybody's got something, and so like that wasn't the reason I stopped reading it. It just, I think all that behind the scenes stuff was affecting the story. And so at some point, like you could tell that the art was different, and it didn't really work. And then like, I don't know, like there was obviously like a disconnect somewhere. And so like, that's why it's kind of a reluctant 10, because I would say the first 2 like trades worth of the book or of the series are absolutely awesome. But, just at some point, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it's not what it was, and I don't want to keep reading it. So I don't know if it's still going, but that's why it was reluctant. And by the way, um, one of my other honorable mentions, I guess, was Sex Criminals. And that's just kind of similar situation where there wasn't anything wrong. Like, I think, the writer and artist there are great. It's just, I feel like at some point it just kind of like, there's only so much you can say. And they did some really cool things with that, the first few issues, you were like, okay, how is this going to keep going? And they managed to make it work, and then they turned into a little bit more of like a crime thriller and a detective story, and that was really cool. But, eventually it was just, I started to feel like, I was like, okay, I feel like I've been there, done that with all of these. So, anyway, yeah, so 10 was Rat Queens, and definitely, like, I highly recommend checking out the first couple trades, if nothing else. Number 9 is an actually short series, and this is Stray Dogs. The series itself is just really fun. I mean, dogs die, because it's basically like a violent action thriller, but starring dogs. And it's sad and it's tragic, but it's also very cartoony, so, like, it's not, like, graphic or anything, but it's kind of a messed up story, but it's just, like, really, really interesting, really appealing, and my God, the homage covers of this series, like, I just kind of want to buy, like, I think there is now a trade that's just the covers, and I just want that, because, like, this is obviously Silence of the Lambs, but they have so many, and they're so great, and, I mean, that's not why it's in my top series. I mean, it's actually a really good series, too, but, that just adds to it. It's like, I have so many copies of these books, because they have so many really cool variants, and I'm not a variant person at all. Like, usually I'm just like, okay, I have the one, unless, like, there's just, like, a couple really cool covers I can't decide between. Generally, I might buy, like, a couple of, like, the first issue of a series, and then I'm not going to just keep reading, getting different covers, but, so I'm not a big variant fan usually, but my goal is to get, like, every one of the covers ever made of these, but, that would take forever, because it's, like, seriously, I think number 1, just between the first printing and then all the variants for that, and then all the second and third printing variants, it's like, there's so many covers, and they're all, like, and then there's, like, a spin-off series, and that also does the same thing, and they're all famous horror movies, and it just goes on, I don't know. I don't know how they haven't run out of horror movies. All right, so number 8 is a little bit of an older series. It's not old, but I would say maybe like 6 to 10 years. Not really 100% sure on the dates. And this is Tokyo Ghost, and I don't know how to say it. So if anyone knows for sure how to say it, I've always said Rick Remender, and then I heard someone on YouTube say Rick Remender, which might make more sense. I don't know why I went with Remender. That was just what I naturally felt like it must be. So if anyone knows how to actually say his name, he is one of my favorite comic writers. Like, I will read anything. I should do that at some point. Maybe, like, comic writers. He's up there, Cullen Bunn. That just, like, there's certain writers that just everything they do is going to be good. And so Tokyo Ghost is, like, cyberpunk, but, like, also, like, cyberpunk dystopian, but also, like, a return to nature sort of Eastern philosophy. This series is great. I think it's been optioned, and at some point it may be a series or a movie or something. And not that they never turn out great, but usually they end up, like, going off the rails somehow. And so I hope they do it justice, because this is just such a phenomenal series. But basically it's about there's essentially a feed put into your brain that just keeps you dumb and entertained. And this girl and her boyfriend are, like, determined to not, like, have the feed put in. But then her boyfriend is, like, an undercover cop. So, like, I don't know. It's been a while since I've read it. And then he, like, ends up getting the feed put in somehow. And then so she's trying to save him and get to, like, New Tokyo where, like, no one has a feed. And so it's like returning to like the before times, before everything was like overly technological. And it's like really emotional, but there's like action. It's just such a phenomenal. And there's a lot of like moral quandaries of like how far is technology going, and at some point like where is our where's the line, and yeah, just absolutely stunning. So if you haven't heard of this series or haven't looked at it, check it out. It's great. Number 7 is Walking Dead. And the reason this is way up here is actually Walking Dead. I do not like the TV show. I'm just gonna be clear about that right now. It's like I didn't like it, and then we started reading the comics. I had no interest in the comics because I didn't like the show. I don't like zombie stuff. I was just like, I do not care. And then I was like, whatever, I'll just read them. And they're so good. And I was just like, oh, these characters are so amazing. So then I went back to watch the show, and I still hate the show. There's like 3 episodes I like. I really like that one episode where like nothing happens, but like, is it Beth, I think? Maybe, and then she like runs away, and they're like, it's like her and Daryl in a cabin, and Daryl's not the best actor, but it's like really emotional, and then like he gets emotional, and I mean, I don't know if I like it because it's good or just because the mountain goats are in it, but they have like a good mountain goat song there. Up the Wolves is in it, and like I love that episode because I think I just like that. I like that scene. If you can like use a song effectively, like in a scene like that, and then I just get like emotional, I'm like, oh, it's the best episode ever. So I mean, maybe it's just because it uses a great song. But anyway, so Walking Dead, like, I didn't really want to read it, and I was not that into it, but then I decided to read it, and I loved it. But the reason this is high up is because they did Andrea, did bad things with Andrea. The show, I mean, forget that. That was like a whole nightmare. Andrea was my absolute favorite character. She is everything, like, I mean, honestly, I was like reading this series for her. She's so badass. But she goes from this like kind of like ditzy college girl, and then you get to see all these really cool things, not cool, I mean awful things, I guess, happen, and you get to see her become this like kind of badass sniper, but she's also like still retains some of her like human like emotion, empathy, all of that, but also like can be cruel and like awful when she needs to be. And so really great character, just so well crafted, and she's amazing. And then like with very few issues left to go in the series, and I mean I'm gonna ruin it for you because too bad. Like, I mean, and honestly, if you haven't read the comic at this point, it's been like I think 5 years since this happened. And if you've watched the show, it doesn't matter because they just like made Andrea like as ridiculous as possible. But then just like out of nowhere, she gets bit by a zombie and killed off. And I'm like, I mean, I feel like it could have been done. I'm not mad that she died. It could have been done really well. Like, it could have been like, and I guess the point was that like at some point they get so complacent they forget that like the zombies are still out there. And I think you could have made that work, but I just felt like the story wasn't going anywhere. And then at some point he's like, I need something interesting to happen, and let's just kill off one of the best characters for no reason. And her death just felt cheap. And then I stopped reading it. So I don't really know what happened in the last, like, I think it was like only like 10 or 20 issues after that. But yeah, once Andrea died, I was out. And so that's why it's 7. And, because I feel like even if she had died, if her death had been well done, I would have had this higher because I really loved it. Andrea is like one of my absolute favorite characters in comics and in books. But she was, they did her dirty. So, all right, so number 6 is Preacher. That's just such a great series. I mean, I'm not going out on a limb here. It's not like no one's ever heard of it. But Preacher is so twisted, so dark, and just a really fun read. It still has one of the most disgusting, the most disgusting, I think, splash page I've ever seen in any comic book. And I feel like if you know, and I don't really need to get into it. But this series, every time you would be like, this can't get more screwed up, it just gets more screwed up. Very, very dark, very violent, a lot of like really messed up things happening. So if that's not your thing, I mean, this is not for you. It's not for the faint of heart, for sure. It's not like, it's somehow like really, really well written and well like crafted though. It's like it's an example of how you can be just like awful and disgusting, but also like have artistic merit. And so, I mean, while it is like super violent and just kind of nasty in a lot of places, like the characters are really great, really emotional, like impact there. There's a lot of like depth to the story, and I mean, this series just. I didn't actually watch the TV show. I watched like the beginning of the first episode, and I could not, just wasn't working for me. I did this a lot, and then I just never go back to the series. And like I should have liked it, and a lot of people liked it, but I don't know. I think it was on like FX or AMC or something. So I feel like if it was going to be made, it probably should have been on like HBO or Netflix or something that was like that doesn't have any essentially like any rules. Not that like you can put anything on HBO, but obviously HBO has a lot less rules than say, an AMC, because there's no advertisers, and so as a result, like they can get away with more. But I just don't think this show was ever going to really be as effective as it could be. I mean, as this book is so like over the top because, there's obviously there's certain things they can't get away with on TV, when they have to worry about pleasing people. All right, so number 5, and this is still going. This is the Department of Truth. And I guess it's like Tynion, Tynan, I don't know. That guy James that's doing like a ton of amazing things right now. I do love Something is Killing the Children. I think this is better. And I haven't read Nice House on the Lake yet. I still have I'm all stacked up ready to go, and I just have not read them. The Department of Truth is just, it's about essentially this department in the federal government that has deals with conspiracy theories and essentially the hive mind and how they, these conspiracy theories spread and, the benefits of some of them spreading, and they manipulate truth essentially. And it's very interesting. There's the first arc or so is every single issue is this guy finding out about a different sort of conspiracy theory, and then it just gets deeper into what the Department of Truth is doing. But there was one about school shootings and about the conspiracy of what do they call it, crisis actors or whatever that's called, and it's really emotional, and it's for a parent who loses a child in a school shooting to then be told it was fake or a false flag or whatever. So it's really well done. It really captures kind of what's going on in the world. And I know this was also optioned, and I think, again, depending on where it ends up, if it's optioned for HBO, it could be amazing. It's tough on I think everything now is being optioned for streaming or HBO. But if it is optioned for a little more of a mainstream cable channel, might be a little harder to get away with certain things just because people might get offended. But okay, so number 4 is Man-Eaters, and some of my favorite writers, Chelsea Kane. I absolutely love her. I know she's very divisive. I don't care. I don't want to hear it. I love her. She's so funny. You may know her if you don't know a lot about her. She was the one who was everyone was mad when she wrote Mockingbird, and then that it was so feminist, and that she was pushing her feminist agenda or whatever. So they have the cover with Mockingbird with her Starbucks or whatever, and it's just ask me about my feminist agenda. And the series got canceled because so many people were upset that had too much of a feminist agenda. So I have, I read that series and it was pretty good, but Man-Eaters does not pull any punches. And so this is essentially about it's the regular world, but at puberty at a certain age, somewhere between 11 and 15, girls start turning into panthers and then going around eating people and killing people, and so they have they start getting all these propaganda and her advertising throughout the book, because they have fake ads and stuff. They're just absolutely hilarious. I feel like this is one of those things I read every inch of this book, because she has just little snarky things randomly on like a page that's like an actual fake ad. And so if you get used to skipping ads, like do not skip the ads in this. It's image, so there's no ads anyway. But so when there are ads, they're part of the story. But basically, like they're trying to like keep boys away, and so boys are learning like how to protect themselves from the panthers, and the girls are learning how to like they get medication essentially that like stops the panther from coming out. And then they get all this training of like how to hide for, and they become a panther for only a few days a month. I mean, obviously you get what the metaphor is. But like this is absolutely hilarious. I mean, there's no question. There's no like hidden feminist agenda. It's super feminist. Absolutely amazing. Love this series. I think they had like a little short spin-off too, but honestly, like I could read anything Chelsea Kane writes. I read her Spy Island, loved that. She had something else I forget. I just wish she would write like everything. She's so funny. I mean, at least I feel like I don't know if I guess that's it. She like got kicked off of Marvel maybe because of the Mockingbird thing, but like don't even get me started on that nonsense. So, all right. So number 3 is Once and Future, and this just made me so happy. This series is Arthurian legends, British literature, fantasy, sort of portal fantasy, with like a cranky grandma who's like a super badass, and like you don't know because she's in this like nursing home, so it opens up with like she's gone missing from the nursing home in the first like issue, and her like grandson is trying to find her and find out what she's up to, and it turns out it's like you think she's this like frail old lady who likes to like play bingo and stuff, but really she's like for her whole life she's been part of this group essentially that's stopping them from trying to bring Arthur back from the dead, because if they bring Arthur back, like he wants to like destroy the world. And but then you have like them fighting Beowulf on the moors at one point, or not Beowulf, Grendel. And this is just like, if you like British literature, if you like Arthurian legends, and you like badass old ladies, like absolutely you've got to check the series out. It's fantastic. I think it's done, but I'm only at like issue 18. I'm like so far behind in my comics, but I love this series. All right, so number 2 is Saga. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about Saga if you haven't already heard it. If you haven't heard about Saga, like, I don't know, you're probably living under a rock at this point if you read comics, because like, I don't know anyone who has read comics who doesn't love Saga. Sir Chalk is kind of getting done with it, but that's because he doesn't care about Hazel, which is kind of ridiculous because she's, obviously kind of the priority in most of the series. But I think also part of it is because they had such a long hiatus after like that horrible, horrible event. And then, it's kind of hard to get back into it. But, I mean, it makes sense because there's like a big time jump in the story too. But if you have not read Saga, or haven't not even or considered Saga, but have heard of it and you just haven't read it, like you need to go do, drop whatever, go do it. I mean, Brian K. Vaughan is always really good. I like Paper Girls. I liked there's something else he wrote that I kind of liked. But my God, this series is just, it blows you away from like the first page. The characters are incredible. Like the story itself is just amazing. It's really just like essentially a family story, but there's like so many things happening. All the like peripheral characters are really fun. And the art. And I mean, like this is an example of a series where I think a lot of times in like Marvel or DC, I feel like they just, even if there is like a creative team that starts an arc, they don't seem to be as committed to them being like together. I feel like certain writers and artists at this point have like a lot more like say though, because obviously like I feel like Scott Snyder gets the artist he wants. But then like some of the like newer writers, it's just like they just give them this like new up and coming artist, and like some of the art's garbage, and then they change their artist the midway through the arc, and it's just really frustrating. Like, it's nice because it's Image, so like it's creator kind of driven, and it's so wonderful because this would not be the series it is, I feel like, without Fiona Staples' art. Like, it's gorgeous. I mean, even if you weren't reading the story, just looking at the pictures, her art is so beautiful. Yeah, so there's like nothing really to say. If you're in the comic world or the comic community, you're unlikely not to have heard of Saga, and you've probably read it, and you probably love it like everybody else because it's just amazing. And then my number one comic series of all time is Sandman. And I don't think this is surprising to anyone who's like heard anything I've ever said. I love Neil Gaiman. But this is the comic that got me into reading comics. I didn't really know anything about comic books. And somebody was like, oh, you want to read some comics? You should check out the Sandman series. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, because I didn't really like superhero stuff. And that's what I'd never read, I can't say I never, I'd probably like picked up like one here or there, but I'd read Archie growing up. And then, and that's not on here because it's like 9 billion Archie series. And, it's actually the reboot was good for a while. I kind of lost interest eventually. I don't know if Mark Waid, is even still writing it, but it was good at the beginning, that beginning arc. But Sandman is just, it's mythology, it's fantasy. I mean, now it's on Netflix, and so even more people, and I'm still on episode 4, which is ridiculous. But this comic series, like, changed my life. Like, I was just like, oh, like, I was a reader, but I didn't really read comics, except, like I said, Archie, really. And when I read this, I was just like, this whole new world opened up for me. I was like, oh, there's this whole other way of telling stories that essentially, like, I had not yet had in my life. And so, I think, like, I know everyone's, like, into manga. I've never really read any of it. And I'm sure at some point I'll read some, and I'll pick, like, a series that will, whatever that intro series is, if it's as good as Sandman, I mean, that's just, going to do great things. But, the chances of just finding a series that could be this good as your foray into the comic world, that's like, if you, like, this and Saga, like, if those are your foray into the comic world, you're going to become obsessed with comic books because there's just so many unique things being done in these series. I feel like most of these series, would be a great intro into comics. But, yeah, I mean, again, what else is there to say? It's, like, renowned as one of the best comic book series of all time. So, and it's my favorite. Absolutely love it. Love the Endless. Love everything about it. There's, like, nothing I don't like about the series. It's not even, like, oh, I didn't like that one arc. Like, some of them I like more than others, but I think they're all, like, 5-star arcs. Everything about it was amazing. So, those are my top 10 comic series. Do you read comics? Like, what do you think? As you're going to see, I'm really not a superhero person, so obviously if your, like, favorite comic series is, like, Batman, you're going to be disappointed here. I don't even know if I have anything that's in, like, the main publishers. Because obviously Vertigo was a spin-off of DC, but, like, Rat Queens, I'm pretty sure is Image. Stray Dogs, I think is also Image, maybe Boom. Tokyo Ghost is Image. Walking Dead is Image. Preacher is, I believe, Vertigo. Department of Truth is Image. Maneater is this Image. Okay, so I really like Image comics. I knew that anyway. Like, for a long time, I would just buy the first issue of anything Image put out. And then I stopped doing that because I had too many comics and I have not read them. And then I could never, by the time I would, like, get to that number 1, I'd be like, oh, I really want to read this. And I'd be on, like, issue 8. And then it would be hard to track down all the other issues. So, yeah, I stopped doing that. But I used to buy, like, the number 1 issue of anything Image was releasing. So, anyway, those are my comics. And I'm curious what other comics you might like, or if you've read any of these and like them. If you dislike them, you're wrong, so that's cool. But, yeah, anyway, that's that. All right, and I'll be back at some point with that 100 book list. I don't know how long it's going to take me. I think I've gotten it down to the 100, but then I have to kind of put them in order from 100 to 1, and then figure out what I want to say. I'm probably not going to talk because I think I just tended, as you can see, it just took me 30 minutes. But I think what I'll probably just do is write like a one sentence or like, phrase or something that just explains why I love that particular book. All right. See you soon. Bye.